Stacchio. Here we go. Good ball. Lifts it up to the far post. Barrera spills. It's in! Goal!
Halfway through CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, and Canada remains undefeated with Mexico looming on Tuesday. We reached Laura Armstrong of the Toronto Star to talk about the Edmonton homestand.
Okay, Laura, thanks so much for joining us. You're in Edmonton, so I have to ask you about that atmosphere right off the bat. You've been covering Canadian soccer for a long time. What was it like to be there in the press box in that atmosphere?
It was pretty incredible. I mean, I have to say that I would expected nothing less of Edmonton. I think that Edmonton personally is like a very underrated sports city. I have to say I've never seen so many snow pants, people wearing snow pants at a soccer game. But the crowd was up for it. And the weather wasn't that bad. I mean, relatively speaking, it could have been a lot worse for November. It was like 1 degree, I think, around kickoff. So it was just an amazing electric atmosphere. Honestly, the game, I don't necessarily know if it lived up to the atmosphere itself. Certainly the result did, though, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
John Herdman called it a grind, and I guess you could put it that way. I mean, Costa Rica's game plan, I think, was to kind of, stunt the Canadians and not allow them to get much going, especially in that first half. What was your perspective? What did you take away from the game?
Yeah, I think that John's, right about that. I think Costa Rica is already teams in this World Cup qualification, and maybe you thought that they were going to come out a little bit more because it was sort of a do or die game for them, I think, in a lot of ways. They're now 7 points behind Canada in the standings. That's a pretty big gap to have to close over the next 7 games. I would say that one of the things that the Canadian team really sort of emphasized going into the game was that they weren't going to focus on Costa Rica. They were going to focus on themselves. And if we're focusing on the Canadian team, then I think that, in the first half, they were disjointed. They were, there was a big gap, I think, between their midfield and their forwards. Their forwards weren't moving in the ways that they maybe normally do. And I think that sort of stunted Canada a little bit. And coupled with what Costa Rica was doing, it didn't make for a very pretty first half. But they went into the locker room at halftime and they figured it out. And when you came back out, you saw pretty quickly off the bat, Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, Tajon Buchanan, creating a little bit more, moving a little bit better, communicating, I think, better. And once Canada sort of found its footing, I think that game was always theirs to win.
Let's talk about Jonathan David for a second. Back-to-back games, looking in form. I mean, how important is that for Canada?
It's huge. And I think that goal that he scored against Panama, I think it was the third or fourth goal in that game. It really didn't matter at that point. They were winning, but I think it was really important for Jonathan David to get that goal because for strikers, the longer you go without having that goal, the more you get into your own head. And I think that the fact that he got one against Panama was huge. And the fact that he, scored last night was also big for Canada. He's been playing really, really well at the club level. And I think that is showing. And I also think he's not going to get enough credit for that goal. Quite frankly, I didn't give him enough credit because you kind of think, oh, well, the goalkeeper dropped the ball, but he still had something to do. Like he had to take a touch. He had to have enough sort of calm to put it in the back of the net in a moment when Canada, very much was really sort of pushing for that goal.
Let's talk about a team that's probably going to come in Tuesday night angry. Mexico, 2-0 loss to the United States. They're not going to be happy about the weather either, Laura. I don't know what the keys to the game are going to be, whether it is going to be the weather, or whether it's going to be, holding off a Mexican side that's probably going to be looking for revenge. I mean, where do you see Tuesday night's game playing? What are the keys to the game for Canada?
Yeah, I think that I don't think that the weather is that much of an advantage for Canada. I know that it's been a big conversation piece over the course of this last week, but there's going to be snow in Edmonton, I think, between now and then. And I think that, Tuesday is supposed to be -13 at kickoff. So it's going to be like a completely different game than the game that we saw last night. I think if Canada is looking at what it did against Costa Rica, I think that it needs to have a stronger game in the center of midfield. I think, Stefan Eustachio is a great player and he has been great for Canada all along. And he was a great player last night, but he was dropping back very deep. He was forced to play a lot of long balls to the forwards. There just felt like there was a disconnect in the middle of the field. And I think if Canada is going to potentially, beat Mexico, which is something that we're having conversations about maybe for the first time, genuinely about this team, then I think they're going to need to find a little bit stronger of sort of a nerve center to sort of facilitate a little bit more. And I think that you're going to see potentially a Jonathan Osorio be a player who comes in and does that. I mean, he had a good performance against Mexico at Azteca, so that could be, somebody who you possibly bring in. But I definitely think that based on what they did on Friday, they are going to have to bring their game up another level to beat Mexico. And as you mentioned, I mean, they're going to be mad. They lost to the US. They tied Canada at home, so they're definitely going to want a little bit of revenge. And we'll see how it plays out. Like if it's messy, if it's freezing, then it might be one of those games that's just like, the team who can survive it is best. It might not be pretty again, but it wasn't pretty last night and Canada won. And that's really what matters for this team.
Laura Armstrong from the Toronto Star. Great to get your perspective, and stay warm on Tuesday.
Thanks for having me.